A Werewolf Shifter Romance by Cauliflower Campbell. Book 2. Chapter 11. The Table of Wolves. The GMC Hummer rumbled low, like a beast too powerful to be contained, as it crawled through the massive iron gates of the Redwood estate. The gates creaked shut behind them with a resonant clang, cutting them off from the outside world. Twilight lay thick across the mountains. The sun had bled away into deep indigo, the stars only just beginning to shimmer faintly across the wide, endless sky. The sprawling redwood mansion stood ahead, its tall windows spilling out golden light that glowed warm against the cool dusk, as if promising safety, shelter, and secrets all at once. Alice sat in the passenger seat, her fingers curled tightly around the small pendant that seemed heavier every time she looked at it. The lightning bolt emblem pressed into her palm as though it carried the weight of an entire legacy. She turned it over again and again, her mind a storm of questions with no answers. Her heartbeat drummed in her ears. In the back seat, Gabriel hummed tunelessly to some upbeat pop song only he seemed to know, his shoulders bouncing lightly to the rhythm. The boy's carefree joy felt almost impossible, like he lived in a completely different world than hers. A world untouched by grief, betrayal, and the gnawing ache of the unknown. Michael's hands gripped the steering wheel firmly, the leather groaning beneath his strength. His jaw flexed in silence, his profile carved by the shadows in the cab. He'd barely spoken since Salazar Beach. The tension rolling off him filled the space like static, yet his presence was grounding. Even without words, his quiet glances toward Alice, quick, protective, unreadable, made her pulse trip every time. When the Hummer finally rolled to a stop in the gravel loop, Gabriel practically launched himself out, arms stretched wide. He breathed in the mountain air and spun once as though he owned the night. "Home, sweet home," he called, flashing a grin at Alice. Then, in mock-serious tone, he added, "You ready for the grand feast?" "Feast?" Alice echoed, stepping carefully out of the truck. Gabriel only waggled his brows mysteriously, already jogging toward the enormous front doors. "You'll see." Michael rounded the truck with steady strides, stopping at Alice's side. He didn't touch her, but the warmth of him radiated so close she could feel it, seeping through her thin dress and settling into her chest. His voice came low, husky. "Come on," he said, as if coaxing her gently forward. "You'll like this." Alice's gut twisted with unease. The idea of being surrounded by strangers, by wolves who weren't just ordinary men, made her palms sweat. But Michael's quiet steadiness pushed her forward. With him near, even dread felt easier to face. The dining hall took Alice's breath away. It was massive, stretching wide and long, with high-arched ceilings and chandeliers dripping warm amber light like falling stars. A polished oak table stretched nearly the length of the hall, gleaming under the soft glow. The scent of roasted meat, herbs, and warm bread curled through the air, wrapping around her like invisible arms. But she froze in the doorway. There were already men waiting, 3 of them, all tall, broad, shoulders squared as if they carried the weight of their world with ease. Dressed in black, their laughter filled the space casually, but when their eyes shifted to her, the sound thinned. Their stares weren't hostile, but sharp, curious. Respect simmered there, and something else Alice couldn't name. Gabriel crashed through the silence with his usual dramatic flair. "Guess what?" he boomed, throwing his arms wide as though unveiling a secret show. "Our Barbie is royalty." The men snorted, laughing in confusion. "Gabriel." Michael's voice cracked across the air like a whip, low but sharp enough to cut. His eyes narrowed, the quiet edge of command woven into his tone. But Gabriel wasn't done. "I'm serious." He flopped into a chair with a wide grin. "She's the lost Stormbane heir. The pendant proves it." The air shifted instantly. The laughter died. The warmth of the hall cooled into sharp silence. Alice stiffened where she stood, heat crawling up her neck. She clutched the pendant at her chest, her pulse hammering. The tallest of the men, with dark hair and a grin that looked wolfish even without fangs, leaned forward. His eyes flicked from her face to the pendant. No way. Yes way, Gabriel crowed, sinking into his seat like he had just detonated a bomb and was waiting for the fireworks. Michael gave him a look that promised trouble later, then stepped up beside Alice. His hand brushed hers, light, reassuring, grounding. Sit here, he murmured, pulling out the chair at his right hand, the head of the table. Every gaze in the room felt like it weighed 100 pounds, pressing her down. Alice hesitated, trapped between fear and uncertainty, but then her eyes found Michael's, calm, steady, an anchor in the storm. And she sat. Gabriel immediately took the opposite end of the table, grinning smugly like he'd just secured a victory. Rio, Michael's beta, slid into his place quietly, his sharp eyes studying everything with quiet calculation. The other two followed, their murmurs low and unreadable, and then, suddenly, the tension shattered. "Storm Bane, huh?" Rio drawled, raising his glass in mock toast. "Guess we're dining with royalty tonight." The others burst into laughter. Someone slapped the table. Another tipped his head back and howled, not in menace, but pure amusement. The next thing Alice knew, voices were chanting her name loudly. The hall roared with the chant, glasses lifted, their deep voices booming like thunder. Alice's face flamed scarlet. For a moment she froze, terrified it was mockery. But the sound wasn't cruel. It was playful, warm. A chorus of welcome disguised as teasing. Her lips trembled, and then, slowly, she smiled. For the first time in years, real laughter, raw and unpolished, wrapped around her like a blanket. The kind she hadn't felt since she was a child. Something inside her cracked open, letting in the warmth. For the first time she wasn't surviving, she was living. Dinner became a blur of sound and taste. Roast lamb drenched in rosemary, buttery potatoes melting on her tongue, honeyed carrots that crunched sweet beneath her teeth. Wine flowed, glasses clinked. The men swapped stories, ridiculous, brash tales of hunts, close calls and mischievous victories. Alice listened, wide-eyed, nibbling carefully at her food, and every time her gaze wandered up she caught Michael watching her, silent, unreadable. His stare wasn't heavy, but it anchored her all the same. When the plates were cleared and the laughter lingered like smoke, Alice excused herself. Her heart was full yet restless. Michael walked her down the long hall, stopping at her door. The golden light washed his sharp features into something softer. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Alice nodded, though her throat felt too tight for words. He didn't move immediately. His eyes searched hers, peeling through layers she'd built for years, as though he saw her hidden fears and guarded scars. Finally he whispered, "Sleep well, Alice." And then he was gone. That night she dreamed of her mother. Morning spilled gold across the mountains, light cascading into her room through tall windows. Alice stirred awake, the pendant gleaming on the nightstand like a fragment of lightning captured in metal. Her hand brushed it softly, and her thoughts drifted to Millie, the woman who had shown her kindness when no one else had. Millie deserved to know. She had to tell her. Downstairs, Michael already stood dressed sharply in a dark suit, his expression razor-focused. "Big meeting," Gabriel whispered between mouthfuls of grapes. "Council business. Very important. Very boring." Alice hesitated before asking to see Millie. Michael didn't argue, but his eyes darkened as he considered. "Take Rio with you," he said firmly. "But—" "No," he cut her off, voice carrying the finality of an alpha. "Rio goes. End of discussion." Rio was at her side instantly, silent as shadow, his sharp gaze giving nothing away. They set off in a sleek black SUV, Gabriel tagging along with the same irrepressible joy. The ride was long, quiet. Gabriel hummed under his breath, tapping his knee, while Alice pressed her forehead to the window. The pendant pressed against her skin, heavy and cold, a constant reminder. When they pulled up to Millie's shop, Alice felt her chest lighten. The familiar bell jingled as they stepped inside, the scent of fresh flowers and herbs wrapping around her. "Alice!" Millie's voice cracked with joy as she rushed from behind the counter, arms wide. She crushed Alice against her chest, the embrace so fierce it nearly stole her breath. "Oh, honey, look at you!" Alice laughed through the sudden ache in her throat. "I'm okay, Millie." Millie pulled back, eyes glistening, her hands cupping Alice's cheeks. "Okay? You're glowing." Gabriel leaned against the doorway with his arms crossed smugly. "Told you we'd take care of her." Millie's gaze darted to him, her lips curving. "And who's this charming young man?" "Gabriel," he announced with a theatrical bow. "Your humble knight." Millie chuckled warmly, ruffling his hair. Charming, indeed. Inside, they sat at a small table tucked in the corner. Alice's words tumbled out in a rush, the estate, the feast, the pendant, the truth lingering at the edges of her bloodline. Millie listened, her eyes wide, her hands clasped tight as though holding her heart together. When Alice finished, Millie squeezed her hands across the table. "Honey," she whispered, voice breaking, "you need to go, find them. Find your mother's people." Alice swallowed hard, tears stinging. "Do it for her," Millie urged, "and for you." Alice nodded, her chest heavy with both fear and hope. But outside, danger was already stirring. Rio had been silent the entire time, but now his shoulders stiffened. His sharp eyes caught the sleek black car that slid to a stop across the street. Tinted windows, engine purring low, predatory. It had followed them, Cross's men, and they weren't here for coffee. Chapter 12. The blood on the pavement. The little bell above Millie's shop door had gone quiet, replaced by the hum of the heater and the sweet aroma of cinnamon drifting from the ovens. The shelves were lined with loaves of golden bread, sugared pastries, and jars of honey. The warmth of the place felt like stepping into another world, one far removed from the chaos of Alice's life. Alice leaned against the wooden counter, a soft smile tugging at her lips as Gabriel launched into yet another of his exaggerated tales. He was perched on a stool, spinning a glass candy jar between his palms like it was a stage prop. "And then," Gabriel said, wide-eyed with mock horror, "Rio thought you add water first before the pasta was even in the pot. By the time he was done, we had a Redwood Estate sauna in the kitchen. Steam everywhere, nearly cooked us alive before the spaghetti." Millie threw back her head, laughing, her cheeks glowing with warmth. She leaned on the counter, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. "Oh, child, I haven't laughed that hard in years." Alice laughed too, shoulders shaking, her palm pressed against her mouth. For the first time in forever, the sound was light and unforced, spilling out of her like she hadn't been holding her breath for years. "See, Alice?" Gabriel smirked, leaning back like he'd just won a prize. "You're welcome. Funniest person you know." Alice rolled her eyes, though her cheeks were pink from smiling. "You're something else, Gabe." Behind them, Rio wasn't laughing. He leaned against the window frame, massive arms crossed, eyes sharp and alert. Where Gabriel thrived on noise, Rio lived in silence. His gaze had been fixed on the same thing since they arrived, a sleek black car across the street, too clean, too deliberate. Its tinted windows reflected the pale sky like obsidian glass. It hadn't moved once. Rio's jaw flexed. He knew the scent on the air wasn't just flour and cinnamon. There was steel, oil, and something sharper, danger. "Time's up," he muttered under his breath, so low the words barely reached his own ears. Alice caught the flicker of unease in his eyes, the way his shoulders tensed like coiled wire. She opened her mouth, concern tugging at her lips. But before she could speak, the sound came. A muffled pop. Then another. Her body froze, not firecrackers, not a car backfiring. It was deeper, heavier, gunfire. The front window exploded. Shards of glass tore through the air like knives. "Down!" Rio roared, his voice shaking the walls. Everything happened in a blur. Alice's heart leapt into her throat as Rio lunged across the room, his massive hand clamped around her arm, shoving her hard behind the counter just as bullets ripped through the shop. Shelves splintered. Bottles of honey burst, their golden insides spilling across the floor. The sharp stink of gunpowder stung her nose. Millie screamed, ducking low, her trembling hands covering her head. Alice pressed herself against the cold tiles, her breath ragged, palms scraped on shattered glass. And then, through the thunder of gunfire, came a sound that didn't belong. A wet, sickening thud. Alice's head whipped around, her eyes wide. Gabriel. Her world shattered. Gabriel was on the ground, his eyes wide, lips parted in shock. A blade jutted cruelly from his stomach, buried deep, scarlet already blooming across his white t-shirt. His body twitched once, then sagged. Alice's scream ripped through the chaos. "No!" Glass cut into her knees as she scrambled toward him, uncaring. She slid across the blood-slick floor, her hands reaching, trembling as they pulled his head into her lap. "Gabriel, oh God, no, stay with me." Blood seeped fast, hot, sticky, staining her palms. The copper tang filled her nose and throat until she could hardly breathe. Her tears fell unchecked, mixing with his blood as her shaking fingers pressed desperately against the wound. Gabriel's face twisted, teeth gritting as he tried to smile. "Guess I still owe you, huh?" His voice was thin, breathless, and it shattered her. "Don't you dare talk like that!" she cried, pressing harder, panic clawing through her chest. "Don't you dare leave me!" Her vision blurred. Her heart was breaking and she could do nothing but watch the life pour out of him, hot against her shaking hands. Then came the growl. Low, deep, not human. Alice's head jerked up. Rio wasn't standing by the counter anymore. In his place stood a beast, fur dark as storm clouds, shoulders massive, claws gleaming under the fractured light. His eyes burned amber like molten fire. The air trembled around him as his snarl ripped through the shop. The men firing never stood a chance. Rio moved like death itself, swift, precise, merciless. Bullets tore through the air, but the wolf was faster. His claws shredded Kevlar as if it were paper. His jaws snapped shut around one man's throat, the screen cut off in a wet gurgle. Another was slammed into a shelf so hard the wood cracked, bones snapping like twigs. Blood sprayed across toppled pastries, staining the sugar crimson. Alice couldn't move, couldn't scream. She only clutched Gabriel tighter, rocking him as if her warmth could tether him here. "Stay with me, Gabe," she whispered frantically, voice shaking, face streaked with tears. "Please, just hold on. You're gonna be okay, I swear, just stay." Gabriel's hand twitched weakly, smearing blood across her wrist. His lips parted. "Don't cry." His voice cracked. "You'll make me look bad." Her sob tore from her throat as she pressed her forehead against his. "Shut up, Gabe, just shut up. You're not going anywhere." The gunfire stuttered, then fell silent. A heavy shadow loomed. Alice looked up. Rio, his massive form shrinking, bones cracking, fur retracting, shifted back into a man. His chest heaved, skin streaked with blood that wasn't all his own. His hands shook as he grabbed his phone from his jeans, his voice raw with fury as he barked into it. "Michael!" They came for her, cross nose. Now. His words were jagged, torn by rage. Alice barely registered them. Her hands were slick, numb, pressing against the wound that refused to close. Gabriel's eyes fluttered, his breath shallow and uneven. "You're gonna be okay," she whispered desperately. "You're gonna be fine, Gabriel. Just hold on. Please hold on." The sound of sirens wailed faintly in the distance, but it was too far. Too slow. The shop was unrecognizable. Shelves toppled, glass glittering like shards of ice across the floor, the sweet smell of cinnamon drowned by blood and gunpowder. Millie sobbed in the corner, clutching a wooden cross to her chest, whispering broken prayers. But Alice couldn't move, couldn't hear anything but the ragged, shallow sound of Gabriel's breathing against her. Because he wasn't moving, because he was slipping away. And she couldn't let him. Not Gabriel, not her Gabe. Chapter 13. The Alpha's Wrath. The night split open with sirens. Their mournful cry bled into the city, echoing through narrow alleys and bouncing off the glass facades of high-rises. It was a sound Alice would never forget. The once warm glow of Millie's little corner shop, a safe place she had come to treasure, was gone, snuffed out in a storm of violence. Broken shelves lay scattered like bones. Glass crunched beneath every breath of air, shards glinting with cruel sharpness under the trembling fluorescent lights. The smell was worst of all. Blood, thick and metallic, clinging to everything like a curse. Alice was on her knees, not feeling the sharp edges cutting into her skin. Her entire world had shrunk to one fragile truth, Gabriel's head resting in her lap. "Stay with me," she begged, her voice quivering. Her fingers pressed against the gaping wound in his side, soaked crimson, but the blood wouldn't stop. It pulsed through her trembling hands, hot and terrifying. Gabriel's face was pale, lips cracked and moving faintly, his breath rattling as if each inhale might be his last. She bent closer, her tears dripping onto his shirt, mingling with the dark pool spreading across his chest. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered, breaking. Her shoulders shook. "Please, Gabriel. Not you. Not like this." The world tilted, her heartbeat hammering in her ears when she heard it. An engine, low, sharp, hungry. Then boots, heavy, pounding the pavement outside. Michael. The door to the ruined shop shattered inward. He stormed through the frame like a force of nature, his black coat billowing, emerald eyes blazing. For a moment, he looked like something torn straight out of myth, a storm wearing human skin. Then his gaze locked on Gabriel. He stopped breathing. His little brother's limp form lay cradled in Alice's arms, the girl's face streaked with dirt and tears, her hands red to the wrist. Michael's heart seized, then snapped. "Gabriel!" His voice came raw, jagged, like broken glass dragged across stone. But his eyes... Oh, his eyes shifted, lifting slowly, dangerously, to the men at the shop's threshold. Cross's men, armed, injured, dragging themselves back toward the street. Alive, alive. Something inside Michael gave way. The air itself seemed to bend, vibrating, thickening with an unseen weight. It pressed down on Alice, on Rio who stood frozen near the door, on every man who dared breathe in Michael's presence. His fists curled. A sound escaped his throat, not a word, not even human. A growl. And then his eyes changed. The soft green Alice had grown used to was gone. In its place burned an unnatural glow, sharp and violent, casting shadows like firelight across the shattered walls. "Michael," Rio tried, but the warning never left his lips. Michael moved. One heartbeat he was still. The next he was carnage. He tore through the doorway, claws unsheathing, his body a blur too fast for human eyes to follow. The night outside erupted with chaos, screams, gunfire, the crash of bodies against metal. Alice flinched. Her grip on Gabriel tightened as sounds filled the air, wet, awful sounds of bones breaking, of throats tearing. She couldn't look. She pressed her cheek to Gabriel's hair, whispering his name over and over like a prayer, trying to anchor herself against the storm. But Michael was not anchoring. He was the storm. The first man never had a chance. Michael slammed him so hard into a car hood that bone shattered instantly, blood spraying across the windshield. Another lifted his weapon, hands shaking. But Michael wrenched it away, drove it into the man's throat, and ripped sideways. The spray painted the asphalt. One man tried to run. Michael caught him by the collar. slammed him face first into the street, and ground him down until the concrete cracked beneath the force. His claws shredded flesh like ribbons, blood spilling across the pavement. Rio's voice boomed behind him, desperate, commanding, but Michael was deaf to it. His wolf was in control now, ancient and merciless. The alpha was awake, and he wanted blood. The last survivor fell to his knees, weapon clattering to the ground. His hands lifted in trembling surrender. Tears streamed down his dirt-streaked face. "Please," he sobbed. "Mercy!" Michael's hand shot out, wrapping around his throat, lifting him high into the air with one arm. The man clawed, gasping, legs kicking uselessly. Michael's glowing eyes bore into him like daggers. "Tell Cross!" Michael growled, his voice laced with death. He tightened his grip. "I'm coming for him." Then, snap. The neck broke like dry wood. The body collapsed in a heap at Michael's feet. Silence fell, broken only by his ragged breaths. The alpha stood in the carnage, his shirt torn and soaked, his hands dripping with crimson. His chest heaved as he surveyed the broken bodies around him. But there was no satisfaction in his eyes, only rage, a consuming, endless rage that promised war. He would burn the world for this, for Gabriel. "Michael!" The voice cut through the haze, soft but urgent, trembling but strong. Alice. He turned slowly, and there she was. Standing barefoot in the wrecked doorway, Gabriel still clutched to her chest, her hair tangled, her face streaked with tears. But her eyes were fixed on him, pleading, "Don't." Her voice cracked, raw with fear and grief. "Please, for Gabriel." Michael froze. Her words slammed into him like an arrow, striking the fragile part of his soul his rage hadn't yet consumed. Her eyes, the way they saw him, even in this moment, even drenched in blood, held a power no one else had ever wielded against him. His claws receded, trembling as his hands flexed. The glow in his eyes dimmed, softening, though pain lingered like fire under his skin. He turned away from the corpses, crossed the distance in 3 quick strides. When he dropped to his knees before her, his hands trembled as they slid under Gabriel's frail body. Gently, so gently it broke Alice's heart. He lifted his brother from her arms. "I've got you, little brother," Michael whispered. His voice cracked, his strong arms shaking as if Gabriel were made of glass. Blood smeared across his bare chest, but he held on tighter, shielding Gabriel as though sheer will could keep him alive. Alice's throat burned. The sight of him, the unbreakable alpha, undone and human in his grief, carved itself into her soul. "We need to move," Rio said sharply, reappearing at the door with Millie clinging to his side. Her face was pale, her breaths coming quick. "Hospital, now." Michael's head snapped up. His voice carried the iron weight of authority. "No hospitals. Too risky. The pack clinic." Rio nodded immediately. "I'll get the car." He helped Millie toward the street, his movements brisk, but protective. Michael rose to his full height, Gabriel cradled against him. He glanced at Alice, her hands still trembling, caked in Gabriel's blood, her dress torn, her hair falling loose. Yet she stood tall, chin quivering but lifted. He reached for her hand with his free one. His grip was tight, grounding, his voice rough and nearly broken. "You stay with me, always." Alice swallowed hard, nodding once. Her throat ached with everything she wanted to say, but no words came. She only tightened her grip back. And together, they stepped into the blood-slick night. Past the bodies Michael had left behind, past the shattered glass and broken shelves. Alice knew with chilling certainty 2 things. 1, Michael would burn the world to keep her and Gabriel safe. 2, Cross had no idea what storm he had just unleashed. Chapter 14. Whispers of the Enemy. The city glittered like spilled diamonds against the velvet night. Towers of steel and glass reached up into the heavens, their faces catching neon and starlight alike, fractured mirrors that cast color over the streets below. From this height, the chaos of the city felt distant, softened into whispers. Cars snaked in ribbons of light. Sirens pulsed far away like the beat of some restless heart. And rain gathered at the edges of rooftops before sliding down into the dark. Behind a wall of glass that stretched floor to ceiling, framed by thick steel beams, sat a man in a black leather chair. Cross. The name alone curdled blood. In hushed conversations across the city, in whispered warnings from rival packs, in the uneasy silence of those who had met him and lived, Cross was legend, nightmare, predator. He leaned back into the leather, the glow of the skyline spilling across the harsh planes of his scarred face. One scar, thick and pale, ran diagonally across his jawline, a permanent signature carved by violence. He never hid it. To him, it was a crown, a reminder of the wars he'd survived and the bodies he'd left behind. In his hand, a crystal tumbler caught the city lights, amber liquid swirling lazily inside. He tipped it once, letting the burn kiss the glass, before raising it to his lips. The silence was broken by a soft click. The door. Two men entered, the smell of iron and gunpowder clinging to them before the sight of blood on their collars even registered. One limped heavily, his left sleeve soaked scarlet. The other clutched a tablet close to his chest like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Neither spoke, neither dared. Cross didn't look up. Not immediately. He simply gestured with two fingers, slow and deliberate, for them to approach. The sound of their boots echoed across the marble. "Well?" Cross's voice was smooth, deep, dangerous in its restraint, like the low purr of a predator right before it struck. The limping man swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Sir, we couldn't eliminate the target," Rio interfered. Then Michael arrived. It got messy. Cross's fingers tightened around the tumbler. A faint crack ran spider-thin across the crystal. Still, he didn't look at them. His gaze remained fixed on the sprawling city below. "Messy," he repeated, his voice a silken whisper that made both men sweat. He rose, slow and deliberate, the movement carrying the weight of inevitability. His 6'3" frame unfurled like a shadow devouring light. The polished marble clicked beneath his boots as he finally turned toward them. And he smiled. The men flinched. It wasn't a warm smile, it was a baring of teeth, sharp, wolfish, the kind of grin that promised blood. "But you saw her," Cross murmured. His tone was almost gentle. Too gentle. The second man nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, she was with them. With Michael, and the younger one. She didn't run. When we opened fire, when the blade came for her, she what?" Cross snapped, moving forward so fast the man stumbled back a step, nearly tripping over himself. The scar on Cross's face caught the pendant light, white against bronze skin, a slash of violence turned into art. "She didn't move," the man blurted, trembling. "She tried to protect him, the kid, Gabriel, but the boy took the knife for her." Silence pressed thick against the walls. Cross's grin widened, slow and terrible. The younger redwood air. His laugh rumbled low like gravel sliding over steel. "And Michael, he came for her?" The first man stammered. "Like a storm, sir. They say the street looked like a slaughterhouse when he was done." Cross turned back toward the glass wall. His reflection stretched against the glittering skyline, eyes burning with something sharp and calculating. "So," he murmured, swirling the last of his drink before setting it down with a soft clink. "She's important to him." Neither man spoke. They didn't need to. The truth was obvious, heavy, undeniable. Cross let the silence drag, savoring it, before finally speaking again, his voice lowered into a blade-thin whisper. "Tell me, could she be his mate?" The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. The first man hesitated, his Adam's apple bobbing. It seemed that way, sir. Cross chuckled. The sound was wrong, dark, amused, like the crack of thunder before a downpour. He turned slowly, clasping his hands behind his back. If she is, his grin sharpened, then she's not just a girl, she's a weapon. He strode back to the desk, the polished oak gleaming under the lights. Pressing his thumb to a biometric pad, he unlocked a sleek black console. A cold blue glow illuminated his scar, his eyes, his smirk. Name? He asked without looking up. Alice, the second man answered quickly. Alice Matthew. Cross tasted it on his tongue like fine wine. Alice Matthew, he repeated, savoring the syllables. Let's find out who you really are, little Alice. The keyboard clacked under his hands, precise and predatory. Within seconds, her life spilled across the screen. Lines of text scrolled by, records, reports, whispers of her existence torn open by digital claws. Cross leaned closer, his grin stretching as he read. Dropped attendance for 2 months, sophomore year, unexplained injuries, frequent ER visits. And this. His finger tapped the screen slowly. A police report. Domestic disturbance, never filed. Daddy must have paid someone off. He laughed. Low, cruel, slicing through the silence. Abused by her own father, he said mockingly, shaking his head with mock pity. Oh, Alice. Poor broken little bird. No wonder you cling to my enemies. No wonder Michael's wolf wants to play hero. The men shifted uneasily, but Cross kept scrolling, tearing apart every hidden corner of her life. Her mother. Dead. A car accident. Rain-slick road. A little girl in the back seat, surviving where others did not. Cross's grin became something feral. Well, he whispered. What do we have here? He turned, eyes blazing with cruel delight. Get me her father's location. The men froze, exchanging nervous glances. Donald Matthew? Cross's voice was silk, wrapped over steel. Yes. We need to pay him a visit. Chapter 15. The Devil Knocks. The storm rolled in heavy and merciless, its thunder rolling across the sky like the roar of some ancient beast. Sheets of rain slammed against the cracked windows of Donald Matthew's run-down house, the water seeping into the edges of the old frame as if even the heavens wanted to drown the place. The house smelled of stale whiskey and rotting regrets. Bottles lay scattered across the stained carpet like fallen soldiers from a war long lost. An ashtray overflowed on the crooked table beside him, smoke curling from the last dying cigarette that clung stubbornly to its ember. Donald sat hunched in his threadbare armchair, his flannel shirt stained and wrinkled, his chest heaving with every raspy breath. He nursed a half-empty bottle like it was the last woman who'd ever love him. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from years of poison and rage coursing through his veins. His eyes were bloodshot, not from tears, those had long dried up, but from a lifetime of anger eating him alive. Outside, the storm raged, thunder cracking so violently it rattled the fragile walls of his world. And then came the knock. A slow, deliberate knock, not the hurried pounding of a neighbor seeking shelter, not the nervous tap of a salesman. This one had weight, authority, a sound that carried the message, open up or I'll open you up. Donald froze, the bottle halfway to his lips. He stared at the door, rain streaking down the small glass panel like veins of silver, his gut twisting. Something inside whispered to ignore it, to sit back down and drown the sound in liquor. But pride was a mean bastard. Pride shoved him to his feet, wobbling on drunken legs as he muttered curses under his breath. The knock came again. Louder. Harder. Donald snarled, slamming the bottle onto the table so hard whiskey spilled over the rim, spreading across the wood like blood. I'm coming, damn it, he barked. His hand fumbled with a latch, yanking the door open, and the world outside bled black. 3 men stood in the downpour, like statues carved out of the storm itself. Dark coats clung to their broad frames, glistening with rain. Their faces were carved from shadows, their eyes cold, their postures sharp. The weight of the steel hidden beneath their coats was obvious. Guns, knives, the promise of violence. But it was the man in the center who froze Donald's breath in his throat. Cross, tall, silent, a predator cloaked in human skin. His black coat glistened with rain, droplets running down like ink staining the world. His scar, the jagged reminder of past wars, slashed across his jaw, pale against his tanned skin. His eyes, cold and sharp as shattered glass, locked onto Donald, pinning him where he stood. A cruel smile tugged at the scar, twisting his face into something almost inhuman. "Evening," Cross said softly, his voice calm, too calm, like a lullaby dipped in venom. Donald's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He tried to steady his voice, but it cracked anyway. "Who the hell are you?" Cross tilted his head, amusement flickering in those predator eyes. A friend with questions. Without waiting for permission, he stepped forward. His boots landed heavy on the warped porch wood, each step carrying quiet authority. The two men flanking him moved like shadows, slipping inside the house the moment their leader crossed the threshold. Donald staggered back. "Hey, this is my goddamn house!" The protest died in his throat when Cross closed the door behind him. The sound was soft, just a faint click, yet it carried more threat than the cock of a shotgun. The living room suddenly seemed smaller, suffocating. Rain whispered against the roof above, the storm now a distant hum compared to the tension filling the air. Cross's gaze slid over the room. The bottles, the cigarette burns on the armchair, the filth clinging to the corners of Donald's life. His lip twitched in a half-smile, half-sneer. "Charming little place you've got here," he murmured. Donald's jaw tightened. He planted his boots firmly on the floor, trying to mask the slight limp in his stride as he straightened. "State your business and get out." Cross didn't answer. He ran a gloved finger along the dusty mantle, lifted it, then flicked the dust away with mock disgust. His movements were slow, deliberate, and far too casual. A man like him didn't need to rush. "You've got spirit," Cross said finally, his voice smooth as silk stretched over steel. "I like that." Donald clenched his fists until the knuckles cracked. "I asked who the hell you are." Cross turned, stepping closer, so close Donald could see his reflection in those cold, merciless eyes. His smile widened, sharp and cruel. "Who I am doesn't matter," Cross whispered. "What matters is her." Donald blinked. "Her?" Cross leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper, his breath ghosting against Donald's ear. "Your daughter." The room tilted. Donald froze, every bone in his body going rigid. His throat worked, but the words tangled before they left his mouth. Cross saw the silence, the flicker of something raw and unspoken in Donald's eyes. He smiled wider. "Alice," Cross said, tasting the name like wine. "Pretty thing, isn't she? Strong, loyal, brave. All the qualities you never were." Something snapped in Donald, his hand curled into a fist, his face flushing with fury. "You shut your mouth about her," he roared, lunging forward. Cross moved like a whip, fast, precise. His boot slammed into Donald's leg with brutal force. The crack of bone echoed through the room, sharp and sickening. Donald's scream tore out of him, raw and guttural, as he collapsed onto the floor. Pain exploded up his leg like white-hot fire. He writhed, clawing at the stained carpet, his breath ragged and desperate. Cross crouched beside him, calm as a Sunday priest. His scar gleamed under the weak lamplight. "That's for raising your hand at me," he murmured. "Do it again, and I'll make sure the next sound you hear is your own spine snapping." Donald's chest heaved, his face twisted in agony and rage. "You son of a—" Another kick, this time to the ribs. The impact knocked the air from his lungs, his chest collapsing under the blow. He coughed violently, crimson flecking his lips. Cross didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm made the violence worse. "I asked nicely," he said, standing tall over the broken man. "Now, listen." He paced the room slowly, his coat swaying with every step, a curtain of darkness moving with him. "Your little girl is a problem. She's gotten cozy with Michael Redwood." Donald's bloodshot eyes flickered with hate at the name. "That bastard man," he hissed, choking on his own fury, "thinks he's better than everyone, thinks he can take what's mine." Cross smiled. There it was, the bitterness, the rot, the festering resentment. He loved it. "Oh, Donald," he purred, crouching low again until their faces were inches apart. His voice was velvet over poison. "You and I, we're going to be such good friends." Donald glared back, his voice rough from pain. "What the hell do you want from me?" Cross chuckled. "Want? No, Donald, I offer." He leaned in closer, his words sliding into Donald's ears like knives. "How would you like to make him pay? Michael Redwood, the alpha, the man who took what was yours. How would you like to rip apart everything he loves? Everything that makes him strong?" Donald's breath came harder, his hatred burning hotter than the pain in his shattered leg. "How?" Cross's grin stretched wide, his scar pulling tight across his face like a grotesque smile carved by the devil himself. "Simple," he whispered. "Help me find her. Hunt her down like the dog she is. And when we drag her out of that gilded cage Michael built for her..." He paused, letting the words sink in, letting the storm outside punctuate his promise with thunder. "You get the pleasure of finishing what you started." Donald's eyes flickered. Pain, rage, resentment. The poison Cross fed him began to root, sinking deep. Cross extended his hand, long fingers cruel a devil's invitation. "Kill her, Donald. Kill her for me. For you. For every time she made you think of your wife. For every look that reminded you she's the cause of your wife's untimely death." The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. Only the storm spoke, rain hammering the windows like nature itself bore witness to the devil's deal. And then Donald smiled. Blood glistened on his teeth. His face twisted into something ugly, something hungry. "I'll do it," he rasped, his voice broken but sure. "Gladly." Cross's laughter exploded through the room, rolling like thunder, drowning out the rain. The sound was terrible, triumphant, final. The devil had knocked. And now Donald had answered. Far away, wrapped in soft sheets beneath the safety of Redwood Estate, Alice slept, peaceful, innocent, unaware that her father had just signed her death warrant. Chapter 16. A Fortress of Fear. The rain did not fall so much as it attacked. It lashed against the sprawling Redwood Estate in relentless waves, hammering the centuries-old stone like 1,000 angry fists. The storm howled through the surrounding forest, bending trees, rattling shutters, clawing at the estate as if even nature itself wanted to test the Alpha's defenses. Inside, the mansion was all steel and shadows. Every echo in its vast halls carried urgency. The usual warm hum of life, staff bustling, fireplaces crackling, the distant laughter of pack members, had been replaced by the clamor of reinforcement. The rhythmic thud of boots rang against polished marble floors. Men carried heavy crates of weapons. Others rolled in reinforced doors and lock systems. Electric drills whined in the distance as crews fixed steel bolts to window frames. Surveillance cameras blinked to life, their tiny red lights winking like watchful eyes from every corner. Armed guards swept the perimeter, their black uniforms and disciplined movements in eerie contrast to the opulence of the Redwood legacy. It was no longer a home, it was a fortress. And in the middle of it all stood Michael Redwood. The Alpha's air carried tension in every line of his body, his emerald eyes cutting like shards of glass as they moved across rows of glowing monitors in the security room. His jaw was clenched so tight it looked carved from stone, his shoulders broad and immovable. He had built walls, weapons, and watchmen around his house, around her. And still, it didn't feel like enough. Not when Alice was under his roof. The girl who had walked into his life like a whisper and now refused to leave his mind. The girl whose laughter haunted his dreams as much as her tears haunted his waking hours. Michael's gaze lingered on one monitor in particular, the live feed from the East Wing. Her room, bathed in soft lamplight, the curtains drawn against the storm. Alice wasn't sleeping. She rarely did these days. She sat with a book in her lap, her shoulders curled slightly forward, 1,000 unspoken weights pressing her down. Guilt. He could see it even from a grainy screen. Michael's jaw tightened. He tore his eyes away, striding out of the security room, his boots echoing across the grand hall. He hated that look in her eyes, the one that said she thought Gabriel's blood was on her hands. It wasn't. It would never be. He'd burn the world before he let her carry that weight. Upstairs, in the hush of the guest wing, Alice sat cross-legged on a velvet chair by Gabriel's bedside. The storm's fury was muted here, reduced to a faint percussion against the window panes. Her voice floated through the room, soft and trembling, as she read from a battered old book. The lamplight painted her golden hair in molten shades, her lashes casting delicate shadows across her cheeks. She turned the page with careful fingers, though her hands shook as if even paper had become too heavy. Gabriel lay pale against the sheets, his strong frame unnaturally still. The white bandage wrapped tight around his abdomen was a jarring reminder of how close she had come to losing him. A monitor beeped softly at his side, its steady rhythm the only sign that life still clung stubbornly to him. Alice's throat ached. Her voice faltered, cracked on certain words. She closed the book with a soft thud and stared at him, her heart twisting so tight it was a wonder she could breathe. "You didn't deserve this," she whispered. Her hand rose, trembling, to brush a strand of dark hair from his forehead. "You were just being you. Brave, stupidly brave." Her lips trembled. Tears blurred her vision. She clutched his limp hand between both of hers, her tears falling hot against his skin. "Please wake up, Gabe," she begged, her voice shattering. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll get you ice cream every single day. I'll even train with you." She let out a shaky laugh that broke halfway through. "And I'll laugh at all your stupid jokes. I'll laugh so hard it'll annoy you." Her breath hitched. She pressed her forehead to his hand, sobbing softly. "Just don't leave me, please." Silence, heavy, endless. And then, a groan. Alice's head snapped up, eyes wide, breath stuck in her lungs. Gabriel's lips twitched. His hand shifted weakly in hers, and then, in a hoarse whisper that still managed to sound smug, "You sound pathetic." Alice choked on a laugh sob, a startled cry bursting from her throat. "Oh my God, Gabe!" She nearly launched herself onto him, then froze, remembering the wound. Sorry, I didn't mean..." He chuckled weakly, wincing as his hand rose in a shaky movement to pat her head. "I like..." "The real Barbie I know," he rasped, his grin tugging faintly at his lips. "Not this mascara-smudged, tragic version." Alice laughed through fresh tears, swiping them away with the back of her hand. "You're such a jerk." "Yeah," Gabriel whispered, his grin turning boyish despite the pallor of his face. "But I'm your jerk." She nudged his shoulder gently, earning a sharp hiss of pain. "Oops, sorry." He gave her a mock glare, then smirked again, his strength flickering in little sparks. And in that moment, despite the storm and the shadows, the room felt warmer. Neither of them noticed the tall figure in the doorway at first. Michael stood there, silent as stone, watching. The relief in his face was a private kind of earthquake, softening hard lines, unraveling knots of fear he had carried for days. For the first time in weeks, the weight inside him eased, just a fraction. The two people he would kill for were alive, and he intended to keep them that way. Days blurred into weeks. Gabriel healed slowly, inch by inch, his stubbornness refusing to let weakness linger. Alice was almost always there, reading to him, talking nonsense, or just sitting quietly so he would never wake up alone. Michael prowled the house like a caged lion, his authority absolute, his orders law. He made her eat. He made her sleep. When she refused, he carried her tray himself or stood over her until she did. Sometimes, late at night, he found her curled up in the library, a book half open on her lap, exhaustion finally winning over grief. Sometimes, he just sat across the room and watched her breathe, just to remind himself she was still here, still his to protect. And somewhere in those nights, something shifted. One evening, as the sky flared pink and gold above the redwood gardens, Michael found her standing on the balcony. She leaned against the carved stone balustrade, her summer dress rippling in the breeze, her gaze fixed far beyond the horizon, as though it held secrets she was desperate to uncover. He stepped behind her quietly, the heat of his presence wrapping around her. She didn't flinch, didn't step away. "You're safe here," he said softly, his lips brushing her hair. "As long as I breathe, Alice, nothing will touch you." Her chest tightened, her eyes stung. She turned slowly, her voice small. "You can't promise that." He cupped her face, his thumb catching a tear before it could fall. His emerald eyes blazed with a vow he could never put down. "I just did." Her breath hitched. The air between them pulsed, hot, electric, a heartbeat away from something undeniable. And then, wow. Gabriel's dry voice cut through like a blade. "Could you two not make out on the balcony where literally anyone can see you?" Alice flushed crimson, jerking back. Michael growled under his breath, his glare sharp enough to cut steel. "Don't strain yourself," he muttered to his brother. But there was no bite in it, just relief, pure, unspoken relief. A month later, the estate basked in summer light, golden rays spilling through tall windows, painting polished floors in warm glow. The storm had passed, but danger still coiled outside, waiting for its moment. Alice descended the grand staircase that morning in a pale blue dress, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. For a heartbeat, Michael forgot how to breathe. She didn't notice. Her hands twisted nervously in front of her. "Michael?" Her voice was soft, tentative. He turned, the world narrowing to her. "What is it?" She hesitated, then forced the words past her lips. I need to go to Bane," she whispered. "I need to know more about my mother." The silence stretched taut, sharp enough to cut. Michael's jaw clenched, his instincts screaming no. Keep her safe. Keep her here. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw ghosts. Questions that clawed at her soul, chains that only answers could break. And he couldn't cage her, not her. His voice was low, edged with steel when he finally spoke. On one condition. Her breath caught. "What?" He stepped closer, towering, his gaze burning into hers. "I go with you. And Gabriel. And Rio." Relief slammed into her chest so hard she almost sagged against the banister. She nodded quickly, her throat too tight for words. Michael's hand brushed hers, a touch like fire, like a promise carved from stone. "You're never walking into danger alone again, Alice," he murmured. "Not while I'm breathing." And far beyond the walls of Redwood Estate, in the shadows where rain never ceased to fall, the storm was gathering again. And this time, it would not stop until blood stained the earth. Chapter 17. The Road to the Unknown. The sun was barely cresting the horizon when the deep growl of the GMC Hummer EV split the stillness of the morning. Its glossy black frame gleamed under the pale light, predatory and sleek like a beast waiting to hunt. Steam curled faintly from the damp earth as the massive tires crunched over gravel, signaling the beginning of a journey no one in that car would ever forget. Alice lingered at the foot of the wide granite steps of Redwood Estate, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, Her fingers clutched the strap so tightly her knuckles blanched, the morning chill biting into her skin. She exhaled slowly, the mist of her breath rising in front of her like smoke, and stared at the Hummer with a mix of anticipation and dread. Both emotions twisted together in her stomach like two snakes fighting for dominance. Michael was already behind the wheel. His posture was rigid, his broad shoulders squared beneath the fitted charcoal shirt he wore. His hands gripped the steering wheel with quiet authority, each tendon in his forearm standing out in sharp relief. His emerald green eyes were fixed on the road beyond the gates, as if bracing himself for every danger that might lie ahead. He didn't look at her at first. But when his gaze flicked to the rearview mirror and locked with hers, something softened in him for a fleeting second, a flicker of warmth that eased the tightness in her chest, if only barely. "Come on, Barbie," Gabriel's voice rang out from the passenger side. He leaned half out the open window, grinning like the cocky devil he'd always been. His boyish charm hadn't dulled even after weeks of lying pale and broken in bed. "Or are you waiting for me to roll out a red carpet?" Alice rolled her eyes, her lips twitching despite the heaviness sitting on her chest. "Keep talking, pretty boy. You'll be the one scrubbing my shoe prints off your precious seat." Gabriel barked out a laugh, warm, familiar, grounding. She hadn't realized just how much she'd missed that sound. For weeks her nights had been filled with whispered prayers at his bedside, with her heart clenched in terror that she might never hear his voice again. Seeing him now, alive, smirking, vibrant even through the lingering ache of recovery, was like stepping into sunlight after weeks of storm. Rio appeared from the side path, carrying 2 tactical duffel bags that looked heavy enough to crush a human spine. His expression was the usual scowl, hard lines cut deep into his face, his steps sure and unhurried. Without a word he hauled the bags into the back seat, letting them drop beside Alice's spot with a thud. "Pack light, huh?" Alice muttered as she climbed in. The leather was cold against her legs, the faint lingering scent of cedarwood and Michael's cologne clinging to the air inside the car. Rio slid in beside her, his massive frame making the Hummer feel smaller than it was. He closed the door with a controlled slam. "Light enough to keep you alive," he said, deadpan. Alice swallowed a retort. The bite in his voice wasn't anger, it was care, his way of showing it at least. The engine roared to life, vibrating through the chassis, a sound that thrummed in Alice's bones. Michael shifted into gear, his movements precise, commanding. No security convoy trailed behind them today. No escort cars, no guards. This wasn't just a drive, it was a mission, and Michael intended to lead it personally. The redwood gates opened with a groan of steel, and beyond them the world unfurled like a dark promise. Alice leaned her forehead against the cool glass of the window, staring at her reflection. Wide eyes, tense lips. A girl who looked braver than she felt. The highway stretched before them like a vein of black cutting through the dawn. Bane. Even the name pressed against her ribs like a weight. It was a place that seemed to live in the cracks of her memory, a shadow she couldn't shake. Somewhere there lay the truth about her mother. About herself. Answers she'd been chasing her entire life and feared with equal measure. The Hummer rolled onto the open road. The estate shrank in the rearview mirror, becoming nothing but a silhouette against the horizon. The golden morning light spilled across the sky, soft and deceitful, painting the world in warmth that belied the darkness waiting ahead. Anyone else feel like this is the road trip from hell? Gabriel broke the silence. He twisted in his seat just enough to flash Alice a grin, mischief glinting in his eyes. "I mean, come on. No music, no snacks. Just Mr. Alpha Brood here staring at the road like it insulted his mother." Michael's jaw ticked, his grip on the wheel tightened. Alice bit back a laugh. "Don't poke the bear, Gabe." "What? I'm just saying..." Gabriel gestured dramatically, leaning back in his seat. "If I'm risking my life again, the least I deserve is some decent tunes and a bag of chips. Is that too much to ask?" Rio exhaled sharply, his voice low, dry. If your mouth doesn't shut, I'll give you something to chew on. Gabriel's smirk only widened. Oh, don't threaten me with a good time. Alice couldn't help it. A laugh bubbled out of her chest, escaping before she could swallow it down. The sound startled her, light and real, the kind of laugh she hadn't let herself feel in weeks. Rio gave her a sidelong glance, unimpressed but not unkind. You know, Rio said suddenly, his voice deeper, softer this time. As much as your jokes make me nauseous, I'm glad you're alive. The car went quiet. Gabriel blinked, clearly caught off guard. Then, slowly, a grin tugged at his lips. Wow! Was that an actual compliment? From you? Don't push it. Gabriel chuckled, leaning back in his seat. Admit it. You'd miss me if I was gone. I'd miss the silence. Rio deadpanned. That earned another laugh from Alice, one she tried and failed to stifle behind her hand. For just a moment, the weight inside the Hummer loosened, replaced by a fleeting sense of something like peace. But it didn't last. Because no matter how much Gabriel joked, no matter how Rio's rare words of honesty softened the air, Alice couldn't shake the coil of dread in her stomach. Every mile they drove pulled her closer to something vast and terrifying. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the ground was about to give way. She risked a glance at Michael. His profile was sharp, his gaze sweeping the road with predatory precision. He was scanning every car that passed, every stretch of asphalt, every tree line like it might conceal a threat. He was a weapon, wound tight and ready to strike. But when his eyes caught hers again in the reflection of the mirror, something shifted. For just a second, he wasn't the alpha. He wasn't the unyielding protector. He was simply Michael, a man carrying storms on his shoulders but holding them back for her sake. Her heart stuttered. She turned away quickly, staring out at the blur of trees. What would he do when he found out the truth? When he saw the whole story she was chasing? About her mother, about herself? Would he still look at her like that? Or would everything between them shatter? She didn't know. All she knew was that Stormbane wasn't just a destination. It wasn't just a name. It was the edge of everything. The road ahead stretched on, long, merciless, and unknown, and deep in her chest, Alice wondered if all of them would make it back. Chapter 18. Shadows of Stormbane. The sleek black GMC Hummer EV growled softly as it climbed the winding stone road, its tires crunching against gravel slick from the morning drizzle. The hum of the engine seemed swallowed by the heavy forest pressing close on either side, as if even nature itself bowed in quiet reverence to what stood at the end of this path. Alice sat with her forehead pressed against the cool glass of the window, her mother's necklace clenched so tightly in her palm that the chain cut into her skin. The pendant felt heavier than it ever had before, almost alive, its etched crest catching glimmers of faint sunlight whenever the trees broke apart. Her pulse throbbed in her ears. Every turn in the road wound them higher, closer, drawing her toward answers she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Michael's hands rested steady on the wheel, his posture sharp and protective, though his silence betrayed that even he was bracing himself. Rio sat quietly beside him, unusually subdued, as though the weight of Stormbane itself pressed on his young shoulders. And in the back seat, Gabriel sprawled with his usual careless grace, though even his golden grin had dulled, his sharp eyes betraying awe. Then, at the crest of the hill, the forest broke. Alice gasped. Before them loomed the gates of Stormbane. They were wrought iron, tall as small towers, carved with swirling symbols that seemed to writhe and shift if one stared too long. The patterns were intricate, almost alive, and at their center, etched deeply, proudly, was the Stormbane crest. The exact same mark engraved into the necklace her mother had left her. Alice's breath caught. Her thumb brushed the pendant as if to reassure herself it was real, as if the metal alone could anchor her to reality. "I think we finally arrived at our destination, Barbie," Gabriel's voice cut through the silence, warm and teasing. His grin tugged at his scarred cheek, softening him, though his eyes were reverent. He leaned across the seat, gaze flicking between the gates and the necklace in Alice's hand, then back again. Alice turned to him, lips parting as though to speak, but no words came. Her throat was dry. His grin faltered when he saw her expression, and for once, Gabriel had no jest to offer. The gates groaned. From either side of the stone pillars, guards emerged. Tall men in storm-gray uniforms, rifles cradled against their chests, boots striking the stones in unison. Their movements were precise, drilled, their faces sharp with suspicion. Michael's grip on the wheel shifted subtly, protective, watchful. The guards advanced, weapons lowering slightly as their eyes swept the Hummer's tinted windows. And then they saw Alice. Everything stopped, their faces drained of color. One man dropped his weapon with a clatter that echoed across the empty road. Another staggered back as though struck. Murmurs broke from them, soft at first, then rippling louder, spreading like wind through dry leaves. "She looks," one whispered, his voice trembling. "Exactly like her," another finished, eyes wide. "Iris," a third's voice cracked. "She looks exactly like Iris." Alice's heart lurched into her throat. Iris, her mother's name spoken here like a ghost, as if she had returned from the dead. Michael opened his door with deliberate calm. The guards stiffened, then faltered. Recognition flashed in their eyes. Their suspicion melted instantly into reverence. "Alpha of Redwood," one of them muttered, bowing his head low. The others followed, bending, their rifles lowered completely now. Alice blinked rapidly. She had seen Michael command respect before. He was an Alpha, after all. But here, in this foreign stronghold of shadows and stone, these strangers bowed to him without hesitation. One guard raised his intercom to his mouth, voice tight with urgency. "They have her necklace," he said. "And she's the spitting image. Do we let the Redwood party in?" A pause. Then a voice smooth as glass crackled through the static. "Let them in." The iron gates shuddered, then began to swing open. Alice's pulse hammered as the world beyond the gates revealed itself. The Bane estate stretched out vast and unyielding. It rose like something torn from a forgotten century, stone walls high and jagged, Gothic towers clawing at the sky, every window glowing faintly against the dim light of day. Banners the color of thunderclouds rippled in the wind, each stamped with a Bane crest. This wasn't the showy, gilded wealth of Lycan Ridge's new packs. This was old power, ancient power, the kind built on generations of blood, conquest, and secrets too heavy to die. Gabriel pressed his face close to the glass, his grin swallowed by awe. "Whoa," he breathed, voice reverent, as if even he knew better than to jest. The Hummer rolled forward. They passed marble fountains shaped in the likeness of wolves, water spilling from their fangs in crystal arcs. Winding gardens stretched vast, lanterns glowing like fireflies even in daylight, casting shadows across the trimmed hedges. The air itself seemed denser, as though the soil carried centuries of whispered history. Alice's throat tightened. She clutched the pendant harder. The necklace pulsed warm against her palm. The car came to a slow stop before the grand stone steps of the estate. A butler awaited them. Tall, severe, dressed in a perfectly pressed suit of charcoal. His hair was steel gray, his eyes sharp as cut glass, his posture carved from pride. He stepped forward with the precision of someone who had served the same family his entire life. He bowed low, his voice echoing across the courtyard. "Welcome to Bane." The butler led them inside. Alice's boots clicked against marble floors, her steps too loud in the cavernous silence of the grand hall. The ceilings soared above like cathedrals, ribbed arches stretching high into shadows. Flickering torches cast warm light against cold stone, illuminating vast tapestries that depicted battles in Sintra, wolves standing over broken enemies, blood-red banners whipping in eternal wind. but none of that held Alice's eyes. Her gaze was pulled to the portraits. They lined every wall, hung in gilded frames and carved wooden borders. Grim-faced men and women stared down at her, their eyes so sharply painted they seemed alive. Alphas and Lunas of centuries past, Stormbanes. Their gazes pierced, accusing, demanding. Alice slowed, her chest tightening. Each set of eyes felt heavier than the last, until she froze. The portrait loomed above the staircase landing, a woman with fiery red hair cascading in waves down her shoulders. Her green eyes glowed with unnatural vibrance, the exact same shade as Alice's own. The brass plate below bore her name, Aurora Stormbane, the first hybrid, wolf and witch. Alice's knees nearly buckled. Her breath came short, ragged, as though she had been struck. Her palm opened, revealing the pendant. The carved crest gleamed faintly, almost humming against her skin. The butler turned, pausing when he noticed her. His sharp gaze softened, his voice dropping to a reverent murmur. "You," he said. "Do you know her? The legendary Aurora Stormbane?" Alice swallowed, her throat dry, her palms clammy. "No," she whispered, voice trembling. "I don't. I just feel—" She shook her head, unable to finish. "I just feel something." Michael's jaw tightened as he watched her. His dark eyes flicked from the necklace in her hand to the portrait, then back again, the muscles in his cheek twitching. Gabriel whistled low under his breath. Rio shifted uneasily, his hands curling into fists. The butler studied Alice for a heartbeat longer, then inclined his head and gestured forward. The air thickened as they walked deeper into the palace. The walls closed in, corridors long and endless, shadows pooling in every alcove. The scent of polished stone and aged wood filled Alice's lungs, grounding and suffocating all at once. Her heartbeat quickened, her necklace burned against her skin, and then they reached the grand staircase. At the top stood a woman. Silence claimed the hall. She was tall, regal, her storm-gray gown shimmering faintly like wet stone under moonlight. Her blonde hair flowed down her back in soft waves, every strand catching the light. Her eyes, sharp, commanding yet warm, swept over them with a power that did not need to be spoken. Her presence was absolute. She was untouchable, and yet, when she spoke, her voice was velvet. "Welcome to Stormbane." Alice's breath hitched, her chest tightening until it hurt. For the first time in her life, she felt as though she had stepped into a world where she belonged. And yet, with every heartbeat, the weight of that belonging pressed heavier, darker, more dangerous. Chapter 19. The House of Secrets. The grand staircase swept downward like a river of marble, its polished steps gleaming beneath the golden glow of torchlight. Every footfall echoed through the cavernous hall, carrying a rhythm that seemed to announce her presence before she even spoke. At the top of the descent stood Luna Selene Stormbane. Her gown flowed storm-gray, catching and shifting the light so that it rippled like silk spun from shadow and silver. Every flick of the torch cast living shapes along the fabric. Her hair, long and golden, framed her regal face, and her eyes, steel-bright and unflinching, looked down upon them as though she were not merely a woman, but the embodiment of the house itself. Michael and Gabriel moved first. Michael stepped forward with the slow, deliberate stride of an alpha addressing an equal. His shoulders rolled back, his jaw set, his every movement careful, controlled, precise. He lowered his head respectfully, though his eyes, those sharp, assessing emerald eyes, never left Selene's. Gabriel followed with surprising grace, the usual mischief in his expression replaced by solemnity. He bowed, but in his way, half formal, half roguish, a strange but honest echo of his brother. Rio stood a step behind, silent, watchful. His wiry frame and youthful face belied the sharp edge in his eyes. He did not bow, but his stillness, his unwavering stare, was its own kind of acknowledgement, like the point of a blade catching the light. And Alice? Alice hesitated. The weight of the Bane estate pressed down on her like unseen chains. The air was thick, old, alive with a kind of secrets that seemed to seep through the very walls. Her chest tightened. Her fingers sought the necklace at her throat. The pendant was warm against her skin, the engraved crest biting into her palm as though reminding her she belonged here, whether she wanted to or not. Michael's voice shattered the silence. "Luna Selene," he said, his tone steady, carrying. His head dipped slightly. "We came to guide Alice, daughter of Iris." The name struck the air like the toll of a great bell. Alice flinched at the sound of it. Iris. The syllables carried weight, history, love, and loss. Gabriel's voice followed, softer but steady. "Her mother has long since passed, and her husband, Donald Matthew, cut Alice from Bane's reach, but she has returned. She's here to know more about her mother." For a long moment, Selene said nothing. Her eyes swept from Michael to Gabriel, then landed on Alice. It felt like being caught in a spotlight. Alice's knees weakened beneath her. She wanted to step back, but her feet betrayed her, carrying her forward instead. Her breaths came shallow, ragged. She reached up, clutching the necklace as though it alone anchored her. Then, with trembling hands, she lifted it from her neck and held it out, the silver chain catching torchlight. Selene descended the last of the staircase, each step echoing. Alice's arms wavered, but she did not let go. She extended the necklace until Selene's fingers brushed against hers. The Luna's touch was cool, refined, but Alice felt the tremor beneath it. Selene's eyes dropped to the pendant, her lips parting slightly as though it were a relic she thought long lost. "You have her grace," she murmured, barely audible. Her eyes lifted, shining, meeting Alice's face. They brimmed suddenly with tears. "And you look just like her." Before Alice could form a thought, Selene stepped forward and pulled her into an embrace. It was fierce, trembling, unexpected. This was no cool, distant gesture of formality. This was family. Alice froze in shock, her arms stiff at her sides. But as Selene's body shook against hers, her own defenses cracked. Slowly, almost unwillingly, Alice's arms rose and clutched the woman back. The scent of lavender and old stone filled her lungs. Selene's voice broke against her ear. "You're her daughter, Iris's daughter, my sister's child, returned from the dead." Alice's breath hitched. The words crashed through her chest, unraveling something she hadn't even realized was wound so tight. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Only a sob she tried to swallow. For the first time in her life, Alice felt it, what it was like to be wanted. Later, the storm of emotions carried them into a smaller hall. It was candlelit, shadows dancing high against carved wooden walls. Steam curled from teapots set before them on a low oak table. The carved surface bore scars of age, lines worn into it by centuries of use. The air smelled of chamomile, cinnamon, and wood smoke from the fire that roared in the hearth. Alice sat stiffly, hands wrapped around her cup, the porcelain trembling against her fingers. Her pale face was bathed in shifting amber light. Selene's voice began to weave through the silence, velvet yet weighted with history. "She once belonged to this house," Selene said. "Your mother, Iris. She was Bane blood. She carried our power, our legacy, our duty." Alice's throat closed. Her breath came shallow, her hand tightening on the cup until her knuckles whitened. "But she wanted something else," Selene continued. Her gaze softened, though her voice carried steel beneath it. She wanted something this place could never give her. Alice's heart pounded in her ears. She chose to walk away. She handed her power, her title, her responsibilities. To me. Selene's eyes flickered with remembered weight, and she left. Because she wanted you, Alice, to have a normal life. She wanted you to live free from politics, from danger, from the burdens that crushed her. Michael sat rigid, his jaw clenched. the flickering firelight painting sharp shadows across his features. Rio's hands rested against his knees, but his posture was taut, wary, as if he expected the shadows themselves to attack. Selene's tone darkened. But Donald resented her for it. He wanted the prestige, the connection. He wanted to use her bloodline for his own pride. And when she refused, when she chose to protect you instead of chasing influence... Selene's voice faltered, her gaze lowering, heavy with grief. Danger followed her anyway. The teacup slipped in Alice's hand, nearly spilling. She set it down quickly, her hands trembling too hard to hold it. Her breaths came fast, shallow, as her mind swirled. And then... warmth. A hand, gentle and steady, slid into hers. Alice blinked through tears and found Gabriel leaning close. His lips curved in the faintest crooked smile. His thumb brushed her knuckles, grounding her. "You're not alone," he whispered. Her chest broke. She bit her lip, eyes burning as she nodded faintly. For a moment, a fragile, fleeting moment, she wasn't drowning. But the warmth faded as Selene's voice rose again. "Come," the Luna said, rising gracefully. She extended a hand toward Alice. "There is more you must see." Alice froze, her gaze darting instinctively to Michael. "Will I be safe?" her eyes asked silently. Michael's emerald gaze locked on hers, steady, calm. He gave the faintest nod, a promise. Alice inhaled shakily and pushed herself up from the table. Her legs trembled, but she followed Selene into the echoing halls. They retraced their steps until they stood again before the portrait, Aurora Stormbane, fiery red hair, emerald eyes, the same shade as Alice's own. Selene's voice softened but carried pride. She was the first hybrid, wolf and witch, the blood that runs through every one of us. Alice's eyes widened, the pounding of her heart filled her ears. "And you, child," Selene whispered, her gaze fixed on Alice, "are her descendant." They pressed deeper into the estate. The air grew colder, denser, until Selene stopped before massive double doors carved with the Stormbane crest. With effortless grace, she pushed them open. The chamber beyond stretched vast, lined with shelves heavy with tomes and relics. Old iron candelabras glowed with dim light, casting long shadows across maps, scrolls, and artifacts. At its center rested a great oak desk, scarred and worn from centuries. Selene moved behind it, her gown whispering. From a hidden drawer, she pulled an ornate, ancient box, its brass hinges etched with symbols Alice almost recognized. She carried it forward. Alice's hands hovered above the lid, trembling, afraid. Finally, she pushed it open. Her breath fractured. Inside lay fragments of a life lost, her mother's life. Pictures, trinkets, faded ribbons, a pressed flower. Every piece carried her scent, her presence. Alice's throat burned. Her eyes blurred with tears, her fingers brushed against a small white band. She lifted it, staring at the faint letters. Alice Matthew Stormbane, her newborn hospital band. Her chest cracked wide open. A sob tore loose as she clutched it to her chest, her shoulders shaking. Selene's arms wrapped around her instantly, pulling her close. "You were never forgotten," Selene whispered, her own tears glistening. "Not for a moment." Alice clung to her until her hand brushed something else, something tucked deep inside, a photograph, folded. She opened it with trembling fingers and gasped. Her mother, young and beautiful, smiling, baby Alice in her arms, beside her a boy, blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, no older than 10, and behind them a tall man, his gaze resting on Iris with quiet serenity. Alice's heart slammed against her ribs. "Who are these?" she whispered, holding the picture up. Selene's face faltered instantly. The light dimmed in her eyes. "That is..." She stepped forward quickly, her hand darting as though to snatch it away. "You're not supposed to see that." Alice jerked back, clutching the photo to her chest. Her voice shook, but it rose sharp. Tell me who it is. Selene froze. Her lips parted, closed, opened again. Tell me. Alice's voice cracked, trembling but fierce. The silence stretched, the candles flickered. Finally, Selene's voice broke. The man beside your mother is long forgotten, and the little boy, it's your brother, Alice. The world tilted, her knees buckled, and Selene caught her before she could fall. My brother? Alice's voice fractured, disbelief shattering through it. Selene pulled her close, her own tears falling freely now. We have no information about his whereabouts. We thought we lost you alongside your mother. But fate, her voice broke again, fate brought you back. Alice clutched the photograph until her knuckles whitened, her tears spilling hot and unending. She wasn't just her father's discarded child. She wasn't just the broken girl from a small house full of silence and bruises. She was Bane, a daughter of secrets, a legacy hidden piece by piece, now unfolding before her trembling hands. Chapter 20. Family Reunion. The night had fallen gently over Bane, veiling the sprawling palace in silver light. The storm-gray banners swayed in the cool breeze, and lanterns shimmered across the gardens like watchful fireflies. The great estate seemed to breathe with its own pulse, old stones steeped in secrets, windows glowing faintly as though each room carried whispers of the past. Inside, warmth flickered in the heart of the estate. Luna Selene had ordered an entire wing of the palace to be prepared for her guests. The attendants moved quickly and gracefully, trained in silence and precision. Their hands carried folded blankets, pillows embroidered with the Bane crest, and fresh sheets that smelled faintly of lavender. Their feet barely made a sound against polished marble floors, though the faint clink of brass candlesticks echoed in the wide hallways. Alice walked behind them with distant eyes, her mind lost to the storm still gathering inside her. The wing itself was carved in elegance. Arched windows stretched high into the ceilings, tapestries hung like frozen rivers of color, and walls were lined with old family crests. Portraits of long-gone Banes looked down from their gilded frames, their painted eyes following her every step. It was too much, too heavy. For a girl who once hid bruises behind long sleeves, who once tiptoed up creaking stairs to avoid her father's drunken wrath, this palace felt like another world. It wasn't just its beauty, it was its weight. A place thick with legacy, expectation, and blood. The air smelled faintly of cedar wood, and books so old the parchment must have yellowed to dust. When the rooms were finally ready, Gabriel, never one to hold his tongue, folded his arms stubbornly. "I'm not sleeping alone," he declared, his boyish face scrunched with defiance. He immediately latched onto Rio's arm. "I'm staying with him." Rio raised a dark eyebrow, towering over him as usual. "Do I look like your babysitter?" Gabriel only grinned, tightening his hold like a child refusing to be pried away. "Nope. You look like my bodyguard. Same difference." For a moment, Rio's expression didn't move. Then, with a low sigh, he ruffled Gabriel's dark hair in that quiet, wordless way of his. "Fine. Just don't snore." "I don't snore!" Gabriel shot back indignantly, though his flush betrayed him. Michael smirked faintly, shaking his head as if he were watching two wolves argue over scraps. Alice even allowed herself a small laugh, soft, fleeting, but real. The sound carried lightly through the hall, breaking the tension that had knotted around all of them for hours. Soon, they were gathered together in the grand fireplace room. The Stormbane hearth wasn't ordinary. It dominated the chamber, carved of black stone veined with silver, etched with runes older than Lycan Ridge itself. Flames crackled inside, throwing shadows that seemed alive, leaping up the walls like restless spirits. The fire's warmth cocooned them, yet Alice could not shake the chill coiled deep inside her chest. They wore their nightclothes now, soft, luxurious fabrics, though the weight of secrets still hung heavy in the air. Michael reclined in a tall-backed chair, his posture relaxed though his alpha sharpness never faded. His eyes flickered with watchful calculation even as he appeared at ease. Gabriel sprawled lazily at Rio's side, animatedly telling stories, half exaggerated, half true, and then I told the chef, "If you're going to serve steak that raw, you might as well lead the cows straight into the dining room." He gestured wildly, earning a quiet chuckle from Selene, whose smile softened the sharp lines of her face. Rio, as always, remained unbothered, answering Gabriel's chatter with the occasional grunt, smirk, or shake of the head. But Alice sat apart, curled into herself in a smaller chair near the fire, her knees drawn up against her chest. The flames reflected in her wide eyes, but her gaze wasn't really on the fire. She was staring into the photograph that lived in her thoughts. Her mother's smile, the boy with golden hair, the towering man who seemed to watch them with quiet serenity. Her heart twisted, restless. No matter how she shifted in her seat, she couldn't ease the tightness that refused to let her breathe freely. Finally, she stood abruptly, her movements too sharp, too desperate. I need some air," she said quickly. Her voice was almost swallowed by the fire's crackle, but Michael caught it instantly. His head turned. His emerald eyes locked on her the way a wolf's gaze locks onto prey. But this wasn't prey. This was protection. He rose smoothly from his chair, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the hearth. His instincts, the instincts of an alpha sworn to guard what was his, flared hot in his chest. He followed her into the corridor, his footsteps slow, measured. "Alice." She turned, startled. His hand caught her wrist gently, not holding her back, only grounding her. Her face was pale, though steady. "I'm fine," she lied softly. "I just need to clear my head." Michael studied her for a long moment, his sharp gaze stripping away the walls she tried to build. Then, slowly, he leaned down, his lips pressed against her forehead in the gentlest of kisses. The warmth of it lingered, sinking through her skin like an anchor pulling her back to earth. "I'll respect that," he murmured, his voice low enough for her alone. His hand slid from her wrist, though not without hesitation. "But don't go far. I'll have the guards tighten the perimeter." Alice forced a small smile, though her chest still ached with unspoken questions. She turned and walked into the shadows of the corridor. Michael stood watching until the darkness swallowed her form. Only then did he turn back inside, issuing quiet orders to the Stormbane guards who bowed deeply before scattering to their posts. From the highest tower, Luna Selene stood by an arched window, her storm-gray gown trailing behind her like smoke. Her blonde hair shimmered under moonlight. Her gaze tracked Alice's retreating form, then shifted to Michael's protective stance. A strange sadness flickered across Selene's face, as if she knew fate was already moving in ways none of them could stop. Alice walked deeper into the woods beyond the palace. The forest was alive in the night. The branches swayed against the silver-lit sky, the leaves whispered above her like conspirators. The cool breeze carried the scents of pine, moss, and damp soil. For a while she simply walked, her thoughts turning heavy in her chest. She didn't know what she wanted from the night. Silence, maybe. A place where no one stared at her like a missing relic finally returned. A place where she could breathe without the weight of her mother's name pressing down on her. The sound of boots against soil jolted her thoughts. Stormbane guards, dressed in storm-gray uniforms, emerged among the trees, rifles slung casually but ready. Their eyes widened when they recognized her. And then, as though rehearsed, they bowed deeply. The gesture struck Alice like a blade. Reverence, recognition, daughter of Iris, daughter of the former Luna. Her throat tightened, her lungs couldn't seem to draw in enough air. She turned quickly, walking faster, faster. Her heart pounded louder, her feet carried her into the darker parts of the forest, the branches clawing against her clothes as if to hold her back. Run. Her body obeyed before her mind did. She ran, faster, harder. Branches snapped beneath her feet, the wind whipped through her hair, her breath tore from her lungs. And then... thud. The sound vibrated against the ground. Heavy, deliberate. Too heavy to be her own steps. Her pulse spiked. Another thud, closer, louder. She didn't dare look back. Instinct screamed at her to keep moving. Michael's name flashed through her mind, but the rhythm behind her wasn't Michael's. It was something else, something primal. The pounding closed in. The earth itself seemed to tremble beneath it. Panic clawed her chest. She pushed harder, lungs burning, legs aching, until her body betrayed her. Snap. Her ankle twisted sharply against a hidden root. Pain shot up her leg like fire. She cried out, falling hard onto the cold earth. Her scream cut through the forest, sharp and desperate, echoing far. Inside the palace, Michael's head snapped up instantly. His wolf surged beneath his skin, his chest constricted with the sharp pull of protection. Without a word, he bolted, leaving nothing but a rush of wind and the faint echo of boots striking marble. Alice gasped, clutching her ankle. Tears blurred her vision as she tried to drag herself backward across the forest floor. The steps came closer. A figure emerged from the shadows, massive, larger than any wolf she had ever seen, even Michael. Its fur glistened under the moonlight, a coat of immaculate white that seemed to glow against the dark forest. Its eyes, blue, piercing, endless, oceanic blue. Alice froze. Her heart thundered so violently it felt like it might shatter her ribs. The wolf prowled closer, its body taut with power, its presence overwhelming. "No," she whispered, trembling. Her hands pressed weakly against the soil. She tried to push herself back, but her ankle gave way instantly. She couldn't move. She couldn't run. The wolf loomed over her. A deep growl rumbled in its chest, vibrating the ground beneath her. Her tears streamed freely as she squeezed her eyes shut. Her lips trembled around the words, "If this is my fate, I accept it." The forest stilled, and then, crack. The sound of bones snapping, shifting, reforming. Flesh twisted, muscles contorted, skin replaced fur. A cry, raw, animalistic, tore through the clearing. Alice's eyes flew open. Before her, the enormous wolf collapsed into motion. Its body twisted violently until the beast was gone, and in its place, a man, tall, dominant, his body sculpted with raw strength, his skin glistening with the sweat of the shift, his hair pale as snow clung damp to his forehead, and his eyes, those same piercing blue eyes, burned into hers with impossible familiarity. He stepped forward, bare feet silent against the earth. His chest rose and fell sharply, each breath ragged, controlled with effort. Then, in a voice rough, hoarse from the shift but steady with certainty, he spoke her name. Alice. The sound froze her veins, her lips parted, her breath caught. Those eyes, she knew them, not from the present, not from Michael, from the photograph, the boy standing beside her mother. Her world cracked wide open. "It's you," she whispered, her voice breaking into a sob. The man dropped to one knee before her, his hand reaching forward as if he had been searching for her his entire life. And Alice realized in a single shattering heartbeat, the boy in the picture, the brother she thought she'd never know, had finally come home. To be continued. If you enjoyed this audiobook, subscribe to my channel for the third part of this book, and also more interesting audiobooks. Join my channel by becoming a member and have early access to stories and second parts of books. Save the playlist for more upcoming audiobooks. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Check out new audiobooks in my channel. Do you think Alice will be accepted at Stormbane? Comment your answers in the comments section. Thanks for listening.